In the beginning, or rather in 1998, Dreamworks Animation adapted the story of the prophet Moses as told by the Bible, and recounted his journey of identity, traditions, and fate as he goes from adoptee to prince, to shepherd, to messenger, to sea parterer, all in an effort to firstly notice the struggle of the enslaved Hebrews of Egypt, then discard his princely privilege after discovering he has a Hebrew lineage himself. Moses flees Egypt and then returns with the help of God and fights for the Hebrews' freedom through the power of frogs and darkness so they can all escape the wrath of his brother, Ramesses, the current pharaoh. The 1998 movie is in all respects a classic and delivers on timeless themes that are certain to resonate with the devout through to the non-believers, unless you're from one of the countries it's banned in. Despite criticisms that it may face now, the film was created with a lot of passion and heart in the storytelling, music and animation departments, even spending a year on the famous parting of the sea scene to really heighten the wonder, epicness and lessons that the Bible had long illustrated in a new and contemporary palette. That isn't to say that the movie sugarcoats much of the more gruesome details of the tale, nor really should it, as it's a fundamental aspect of Moses' realization and journey. However, the film really went against the odds to become a success. It's a dark Bible story that decided to take some artistic liberties to tell the story through a somewhat cartoon/Disney formula. It's grandiose in its art, and it's not filled to the brim with jokes or goofy side characters to entertain children. In a lot of ways, the original film was a fluke in terms of coming together as a biblical animated movie that successfully delivered between its intent, its demographic, and its pretty foreboding themes. So, how does this transfer to the stage? Or rather, should it have been transferred to the stage? We can see Disney putting on its darker material successfully through the likes of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, that lent into the darkness of Victor Hugo's original source material to create a collaboration between the light-hearted elements of the animated film, through to highlighting what Hugo had intended in his novel, albeit without the long passages of architectural praise. But with Prince of Egypt, I suppose there was an expectation that it would also do this type of collaboration to see an epic come to life with unrivaled theatre magic, complexity and emotion. And hey, to draw the comparison closer, we even got the same director from La Jolla's Playhouse production of The Hunchback of Notre Dame on the team. So, it's going to be a success, right?
Single-handedly, you will manage to bring the greatest kingdom on earth to ruin.
The first point I want to make is that the tale of Moses is supposed to be dark. Like, really dark. And this serves a purpose to create the setup of just how deep the Hebrew suffering goes, inflicted by a tyrannical reign of pharaohs. The opening number doesn't shy away from this, and is named Deliver Us. It's a cry from the slaves suffering for a perceived eternity of hardship under Pharaoh's brutal rule. And we got probably the least emotional, the least heart-wrenching adaptation in the entire musical. It's seriously impressive to witness a theatrical car crash at this level so early into the show, not to mention the added scene, which we will get to later. The ensemble have the impossible job of trying to weave between acting as the muscled and floor-humping Hebrews, then to what can only be described as gargoyles overwatching the family. Seriously, what is this? Then immediately transform into the incredibly agile Nile, introducing a leg stretch move that will only repeat itself at least 100 more times throughout the show. And then finally, back to being the indifferent slaves again to finish the number. The lack of emotion and turmoil from the very beginning of The Prince of Egypt is a stab at the heart of why the slaves require a prophet in the first place. No shade to the ensemble, who clearly brings something to the table, but it's difficult to feel the injustice, servitude and hunger for freedom coming from the slaves when they spend more time rolling around as the Nile than they do portraying the grief of their collective suffering. I do want to make it clear that I don't have any issue with the cast themselves, who are talented in their own rights and have since gone on to do better things, but rather the direction of how they are utilised, and boy, are the chorus utilised. 1 minute they're the River Nile, the sands, then next a chariot, a burning bush, even columns. The chorus encompasses not only the people that live within this world, but the very fabric of its universe. This may sound artistic and even kind of unique, but there are other issues that detract from the vision being realised to its full potential, because, my god, what are they wearing? We can see in the animated tale that the slaves understandably didn't wear a lot, but they were in no way wearing clothes from a clearance sale from Shein preparing to go to Coachella. This decision removes their utility because everything just becomes sexy versions of what they're supposed to be. The sexy Nile, the sexy burning bush, and unfortunately, the sexy slaves. It doesn't really help that some of the ensemble members lean into this sex appeal as opposed to conveying the storytelling of the piece they are performing, which creates a mindless block of people who show as much emotion portraying a column as they do the plight of the Hebrews. The ensemble's choreography can also be inappropriate at times, but as a positive, it definitely highlights the athleticism and capability of the ensemble, who are clearly talented, but otherwise poorly directed. Did they have to do full-on dancing numbers for Deliver Us or The Plagues? No. In all honesty, The Prince of Egypt Beyond a Couple of Numbers really didn't need dance to be its core focus, and is a directorial sin that plunges the show into something that feels shallow, because why are they voguing to The Plagues? Why are they doing sexy moves for songs that do not require it? The core focus on physical theatre and dance drags down the show to something that feels at odds with the material itself. Because imagine the crucifixion at the end of Superstar, but with a circle of semi-clothed sexy Romans rolling on the floor around it. The crucifix is also a chorus member. Now, Ramesses has a different interpretation in the musical overall. In the animated film, he ends up attaining the qualities of the pharaohs before him and the traditions that are past, becoming a commander that his father would have appreciated, albeit whose anger and stubbornness leads to his own downfall. However, in the musical, he doesn't make any decisions for himself. He's significantly weaker as a person and character who is directly goaded by his wife Nefertari and his advisor Hotep to maintain his authority. This isn't necessarily a bad choice, as it's made to echo Moses and his unyielding destiny as God's messenger. However, it's problematic in that it removes Ramesses as a villain blinded by his own pride, and rather serves to make him more redeemable later down the line. So, for better or for worse, Ramesses has no agency, apart from one decision, which we will get to later.
I'm eager to make an alliance because of your beauty, and your intelligence, and charm, and your
Additionally, Nefertari, his wife, is a new character who is a focused career woman, using her marriage to Ramesses as a status leverage. They pepper in the idea that she's a full character by hinting she dreams of love, and this wraps up with her late Act 2 number, Heartless, where we see a break in her driven nature. But, to be honest, they don't flesh out her character enough to justify this number feeling anything other than pointless. With Moses, the main change is that they made him more emotional overall, with direct reactions to his duty in an effort to further humanise him. However, he loses a lot of what made him quite spiritual or epic in the movie, as it's played quite one note throughout the show. There's no real journey, depth, or even musical progression that allows Moses to act in an organic or authentic way. It doesn't help that Luke Brady tends to give crazy eyes at some points and misses the mark with his acting decisions sometimes, but in general he does an okay job at portraying Moses considering all of the shenanigans that are going on around him. Is he the most interesting part of the show? Not really, but that's okay. He's just the messenger. However, they did expand on Moses' love interest, Zipporah, and gave her actual lines in the second half, which she did not have in the movie. Her introductory song is one of the better written ones, and Christine Oliado gives it the vocal pizzazz that's sorely missing from the majority of the other main characters. An issue that has been highlighted from reviews is that this show feels pantomime, or as The Guardian put it, Ramesses Goes to Vegas. As a pretty prominent example of this, Seti, who is the Pharaoh of Egypt at the beginning of the show, and is supposed to be the problematic/traditionalist influence on Ramesses, and is what Ramesses becomes, ends up reading his lines like he's in said pantomime show.
But it must be terrible to have a wife who bores you.
I wouldn't. No.
Stop. Don't even try that.
Even his song, 1 Weak Link, which is the whole reason why Ramesses acts the way he does, feels neutered compared to the original scene.
One damaged temple does not destroy centuries of tradition.
But one weak link can break the chain of a mighty dynasty.
That 1 weak link is you.
Why did they feel the need to dilute the figure that is really in essence supposed to be the start of the chain of events? On the other side, Queen Tuya, wife of Seti and the mother/adoptive mother of Ramesses and Moses respectively, has had her role expanded. I particularly like her new lyrics in The Plagues, where she feels hurt by Moses' action against herself and the life she thought would benefit him.
And it breaks my heart to ask you, did you hate us all along?
Then the ensemble jump in like gazelles to ruin the moment. And then there is Miriam. In the original movie, Miriam is the personification of hope, and really the guiding voice of the slaves, which becomes realised in the final act of the film with the number When You Believe. She helps Moses on his journey and helps him back on track when he questions whether what he is doing is the right course of action. In the musical, Miriam is a member of Heaven's Gate, not Heaven's Eyes. She acts like a crazed cult member who has had her elements of hope stripped from her and instead is replaced with oftentimes fanatical faith.
How is this possible?
God has stretched out his hand and shown his power. You have to believe me now. God has sent Moses to deliver us.
Fighting only makes matters worse!
Aaron! Moses will help us. Don't stand in his way. You know how I sound. I know that people are always laughing at me, saying I'm crazy, but God has given me visions.
This could be closer to the Bible's interpretation of her, where she is a bit more rough around the edges, but it doesn't serve the musical's message of hope and belief any justice to make her this way. The way I can explain it is that she seems almost righteous in the devastation of the plagues, that God coming down and smiting everyone is a wonderful gotcha moment to the people who didn't believe her crazed ramblings.
Plagues, darkness and fire.
She isn't even the character that aids Moses back on his feet when the ramifications of the plagues takes a mental toll on him. Her monologue is removed that illustrates her humanizing aspects, so we really don't get a lot to go on beyond her preaching and rather strange interludes as a character. Even when You Believe starts, she's just alone, separated from the active turmoil that Moses is going through. Her prophecy finally fulfilled atop the rock as Moses and Zipporah weep below. The priorities of this show are confused and the storyboarding of them even more so, which is surprising because in the original film, every scene, shot and orchestration motif serves a point to guide the audience to its conclusion. The issue with the adaptation in the musical is that they're being asked to summarize too much. Character depth is great, but only when it's relevant to the narrative and overall structure. Miriam has the impossible task of being the only desperate, hopeless slave in all of Egypt, which makes her seem maniacal in comparison to the slaves who are too busy fan-kicking to notice their struggle. Seti has been tasked with making pantomime comedy in between enforcing what is supposed to be a harsh rule and a strict hold on Ramesses. In the movie, he shows he can be warm, but not a joke. These decisions detract from what the film had already made accessible to them, and dilute not just the characters, but the entire message of the show. So, beyond a wall of beautiful chorus people acting as anthropomorphic sand, pixelated backgrounds, and the failure to make the audience feel the pain and suffering that we should, the music by Scott Schwartz must do something to move the needle right and expand the story. With 10 extra songs created by Schwartz, who was part of the original creative team for Prince, well, yes, it does. But for me, it's not exactly defying gravity, more feet firmly planted on the ground. The animated tale only had a few songs on its soundtrack and some utterly gorgeous orchestration by Hans Zimmer to complement. But in all honesty, despite one song, the soundtrack is pretty golden and is bursting with heart, passion, and effective storytelling. In the musical, there's no nuance or subtlety to the new songs, no double meanings or poetic energy to them. It feels like someone drew up how to make a Broadway show in a boardroom and just jammed in songs where they thought songs should be, without inspiring instrumentation or lyrics. Compare and contrast with the movie, where the motifs only get stronger every time you hear them, likely due to Zimmer's part in them. For example, Red Sea is a blend of motifs of Moses, God, Seti/Ramesses, and the Hebrews all in one beautiful and epic piece of score. In the musical, all of the work that Zimmer provided them, from what I can see, has been completely removed and replaced with various orchestrations of the opening song, Deliver Us.
I am the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
The combination of themes coming together at the end doesn't exist. It's almost like he removed his hand from this project completely. The musical in essence is super corporate, while wanting to be spiritual and magical, but can't match the energy that the animated creative team were able to musically bottle. Whilst mentioning Stephen Schwartz, let's talk about the direction of the show, or more to the point, the director, his son, Scott Schwartz. Now, nepotism in the theatre isn't really anything new, and on paper, Scott actually has credentials that would put him as a formidable option to direct this piece. As aforementioned, he had directed The Hunchback of Notre Dame in the La Jolla Playhouse, which as a product holds pretty solid ground. It's a weaving between animation and theatre that sure isn't perfect, but added texture to both Victor Hugo's novel and the Disney-fied version. Comparatively, his direction with Prince seems diluted from the animated version and fails to make really any kind of directorial choice that strengthens or benefits a stage adaptation. I would argue that the way the script is written and directed floats like a hollow touring production of a Disney stage musical, but without the magical light themes to make it user-friendly. As an example of bad writing and direction which creates a huge loophole early into the show, they create an additional scene where Miriam speaks with Queen Tuya and tells her the name of Moses. This starts a lot of problems because it means that Tuya kind of stole a baby in front of a direct link to said baby. It's not like she found some abandoned baby as per the movie, she literally has a direct connection in front of her that she chooses to ignore. Then it also creates an issue as to Moses' name, as it's Miriam, a Hebrew slave, who suggests it, and Tuya does not know what it means.
We must find a good name for you.
Moses, Your Majesty.
Moses? What does that mean?
Deliverance.
Is the show trying to say Moses is a Hebrew name? Why would she name the future prince of Egypt a Hebrew name? If it's Egyptian, why did Miriam know what it meant and Tuya didn't? Miriam's inclusion in the scene is super weird, not to mention the curtsy she does. Like, why add this? What did it add? Nothing but problems that could have just been done without. Speaking of problems, as mentioned, The Parting of the Sea took a year in animation for artists to capture the perilous yet wondrous journey through the Red Sea. The London adaptation decided to commit a secondary school production sin and got them to walk through the audience. Did a room full of theatre designers honestly sit there and decide that the biggest moment of the show could be replaced with a simple walk through the audience? From every design and writing perspective, this show fell and hit every branch of an angry burning bush on its way. To be honest with you, I question what Scott's directorial decisions were, but because it seems like the choreographer, Sean Cheeseman, had a much harder job in having to create an entire set out of people. When it's not just dancing or pretending to be sand, there's a lot of just standing there to be able to seamlessly decide what was directed from Scott and what could have been placed as a choreographer's challenge. We don't have people rolling on the stage to represent the Palace of Justice in The Hunchback, so it's hard to distinguish who truly lies at fault for these choices. Additionally, the lack of set makes people, like the set designer, roll up for questioning. Did he just decide upon these random blocks, a tent, and some pixelated screens and then call it a day? If so, did he really feel he was conveying an epic through what looks like a 90s video game sprite artwork? But, as the saying goes, the captain goes down with the ship, so Scott is really the one who should answer these questions because either he was part of all these decisions or he should have spoken up against them. The Plagues is a feature song of both the original and this show. It's where Moses' warnings reach a climax after Ramesses refutes the request to let the Hebrews go, despite the severity of the consequences getting greater. It ends with total darkness for 3 days and a curse to eradicate all firstborn from households whose families did not follow the instructions of branding their door with lamb's blood. This ends with the death of Ramesses and Nefertari's son and makes Ramesses finally let the Hebrews go with Moses. In the animated tale, this is accomplished with a white wisp going through and checking all the doors and taking the lives of the firstborns who did not heed the warning. It's quite an ominous scene that ends with a torrent of souls and screams going into the sky. The musical actually had quite a nice effect for this through the use of baby blankets being unwrapped and revealed to be empty. Then they ruined it with this. When we watched this live, people laughed at this part of the scene. It's almost like they get really close to doing something right, and then one weak direction breaks even the mightiest of choices. This said, the ending is perhaps one of the most whelming parts of the adaptation. The choice to charge the Hebrews escaping through the Red Sea comes from Hotep, and not any form of hot-headed traditionalist influence from Ramesses. Hotep instructs Ramesses to kill Moses, to which Ramesses finally makes a decision and says no, because too much blood has been shed. Like, Okay, tell that to the people suffering from lice, boils, and had nothing to drink but blood housing hundreds of frogs' water for days on end. Moses and Ramesses part ways after a comment about him being so great, and Hotep drowns in the Red Sea after continuing to pursue the Hebrews in a really odd circumstance to switch him into being the primary antagonist. I get that they wanted to punish the advisors and influencers and spare the poor, indecisive Ramesses who was unable to speak up for himself, but it dilutes the original ending where the failures of Ramesses to change is directly punished, and Moses' true qualities as the liberator of the Hebrews is rewarded. Instead, we get this kind of lukewarm parting where all is immediately forgiven and all ends joyously, except for Hotep and the firstborn children of Egypt who didn't happen to have access to lambs. Even the ghosts of both brothers' parents come out, including Tuya, who assumedly died off stage from plague. It's like, oh wow, I'm so glad Daddy Pharaoh approves of freeing the Hebrews he'd previously genocided. It was all for nothing in the end. The finale is so baffling and ruins any effective character decision making they had created prior to that, because ultimately it didn't matter, or go anywhere. Moses and Ramesses felt incompetent as leaders because they ultimately were weakened as characters by the adaptation to give a happy ending. Moses is an emotional mess, not a spiritual leader, and Ramesses is easily manipulated by the hierarchy that still exists when he returns to his court, minus a big bulk of his workforce and one high priest. Oh well, at least we can be satisfied knowing that the freed Ensemble members will be happy to roll around as sand in the desert for the next 40 years. Would I recommend this show?
Never enough.